Fun with Steve Grumbine. He's the founder and CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action and host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. He's also a leading activist and evangelist for modern monetary theory, so he can explain to us how in the world we're going to afford this $100 billion aid package. Steve, welcome back to the show. Always happy to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me on, guys and gals.
Steve, let's start with the race for Speaker of the House. Round 3 of the voting was supposed to be today at 11 o'clock, but Jim Jordan canceled it. Republican sources are saying that he's dropping out of the race and later today will endorse the idea of empowering Patrick McHenry. He kind of sort of did that about 15 minutes ago. But Representative Don Mauer of Pennsylvania, who I never heard of until an hour ago, says that he wants to be Speaker of the House now. And maybe 5 or 6 other people we've never heard of would like to be Speaker of the House. So, of course, there's nothing happening anywhere else in the world right now. So Republicans have the luxury of just letting this play out, right? So, first of all, is Patrick McHenry going to be a rump speaker, as Michelle said earlier, until January of 2025? Was Matt Gaetz successful in empowering House Democrats and eviscerating House Republicans? Because that kind of seems to be what happened. What do you think?
I'll be perfectly honest with you. 15 minutes ago, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is quickly evolving, quickly spiraling out of control. I find it fascinating that at a time of where literally we are standing on the edge of what I would consider to be the closest thing to World War III.
Agreed.
The most credible moment of volatility and geopolitical nightmares. And here we are debating over which of the sludge will be Speaker of the House. I find that to be absolutely fascinating. But in fairness, though, I mean, look, the interesting thing about getting a speaker is that you've got to be able to be the guy that can pull the different groups together.
Exactly.
And they are factioned out so much that the idea of moving forward with any one of them was lost when they got rid of McCarthy.
Yeah.
And so, interestingly, I genuinely, I would like to be Nostradamus here. I don't have a clue how this is going to turn out. I really genuinely don't. It seems to me like having this guy stand in a pro tem sort of way is probably the path of least resistance. It's probably the path that has the most opportunity for success. Because to your point, I think you said this guy was from Pennsylvania, and I live in Pennsylvania, and I wouldn't know him from gum on the bottom of my shoe.
Right.
So
neither would I. I'm from Pennsylvania. I never heard of this guy. And today he wants to be the Speaker of the House. You know, I was thinking about something else too, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. When I first went to work on Capitol Hill, this is a long time ago, Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. And I was working for a conservative Democrat from Western Pennsylvania, Representative Joe Coulter. Joe ended up doing 6 years in a federal prison on bribery charges, but he was a good guy, like a nice guy you'd like to hang out with. But anyway, he told me something once about the job of the whip that always stuck in my mind. And I'm talking about 1982, 1983. He said the job of the whip is to go around to every member of Congress from your party and say, listen, we want you to vote this way on this bill. And then you could say, you know what, Whip, I'm uncomfortable with that. And I don't think my constituents will like it, so I'm not going to vote with you on this one. And he would whip as many votes as he could. And the other side was doing the same thing. So if you've got, 220 Democrats and 220 Republicans almost, and maybe you count on 180 on your side, and you're going to lose 20. And then you just sort of hoped for the best, that if you lose 20, the other side might lose 20. You may get enough to pass your legislation. Now, you will do as you are told by the whip. And if you don't do as you're told, you can be expelled from your party caucus. You can be stripped of your committee assignments. You can be primaried by the Democratic or Republican National Committee. You can be denied fundraising. I mean, it's shocking. We've transitioned into really what is a parliamentary system where if you don't do as you're told and vote the way you're told, you're out. And they'll find someone to replace you who will do what he's told. What do you think? Do you agree with that? We've seen that kind of a transition?
I think that this is the expression of a private corporation flexing its muscles to get what it wants. And it's not the electeds that you've got to concern yourself with. It's the long timers that pull the levers.
That's right.
Between. And they are setting the stage to get exactly what the donor class wants, what the oligarchs want, what the plutocrats want. Mm-hmm. And make no mistake about it, people's lives are on the line. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not a game, and it's not democracy either. Make no mistake about it. Anybody that actually thinks we vote and we elect people and they go serve our needs is literally drinking mother's milk. I mean, we need a bib for those folks. We're at a point now where we got to pull the binky out. And we've got to start talking serious. What you just expressed and what we're talking about right now is why we need to build power outside of this electoral process to make change, because the change isn't coming. We have literally got zero voice in this process. And you see the machine of these private corporations flexing out, because ultimately, why do they have no responsibility? Remember the lawsuit in Florida where Bruce Spiva, the DNC attorney, basically said point blank, we have no responsibility to make sure funds get to your candidate. We have no responsibility whatsoever to ensure that we conduct primaries, much less respect the outcomes of said primaries. We have no responsibility to conduct primaries. So when you think about the role of the parties on their own constituents, this is a pretty brutal process that should be the ultimate magnifying glass on what the problem is with the private sector versus the public sector. The private sector is not democratic, not elected, not in any way, shape, or form accountable to we the people, but yet it wields unreal power over our lives. And it's executed through the real control they have on these props that we call representatives. So, listen, I believe it and I see it.
If you're looking at the race, the 2016 race, was it 2000? Yeah, the 2016 race between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. You get Bernie Sanders, who wins like 65% in both West Virginia and Wyoming, and wins 0 delegates. 0. Because Hillary Clinton won all the delegates. The system is so corrupt and so stacked in favor of the chosen candidate that we can't call this a democracy, whether it's in the presidential primary system or in a race for Speaker of the House or whatever it is. This is not real democracy. It really isn't.
No.
I want to ask you, Steve, Joe Biden's going to give this primetime talk tonight. It's only the second one of his presidency. And it looks like he's going to ask for $100 billion, an incredible amount of money that would be not sent to, but that would be used to arm Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, and to close the border with Mexico. What do you think of this? And how does this disruption in the House of Representatives play into the decision to ask for this incredible amount of money? Have the Republicans in the House eviscerated themselves? Is this thing going to pass just because Joe Biden wants it to pass and the Republicans are in disarray?
Well, let's start with Joe Biden. I don't think Joe Biden has his mental faculties are any better than Feinstein's even today, by the way, not just when she was alive. Okay. I think Joe Biden is a walking corpse. And I think that his handlers have goals and desires similar to the goals and desires of the people that are blocking anyone from being in the House, those factions, those moneyed interests. Now, let's get to the $100 billion. $100 billion for a country that creates its own money is nothing. It doesn't,
It's fake.
it literally costs nothing. It's literally digits that they finger into a keyboard, into an account called the Treasury's general account, and it is spent wherever they want it to be spent. That's the beautiful thing about understanding your country creates currency out of thin air when it writes law. Okay. Most people don't think that way. Most people think we got to raise taxes or something. We fundamentally should know by now, unless we're still with a bib and with a binky, we should know by now that the nation creates its money when it spends it into existence like it's doing here. Now, what's going on here, right? We've got Israel, who is the big dog, taking on a tiny little landlocked, completely and utterly crushed group of people in Hamas, but the big bad U.S. is going to help them. I find that to be the most repulsive, vile, disgusting act of fascism I have ever seen in my life, bar none. Like it rivals things that we saw in 1940s in a way that nobody in America will really take a good look at because they're terrified to say it. They're terrified to say it. I'm not, but they are. And I think that it's one of those horrible situations where we're about to put guns and bombs and money and all kinds of stuff in the hands of people that are going to cleanse, literally cleanse, genocide the people of Palestine, which is disgusting to me. That's number one. Number two, you look at Taiwan. Why is Taiwan even a thing right now?
Yeah.
Why are we looking at the reason why Taiwan's a thing is because it's the hub for China.
Sure.
It is an opportunity for us to put our thumb in China's eye. And I think I've said this a few times, but if you go back to Joe Biden's first State of the Union, he already primed the pump for China to be the fodder to get spending up. They use them as the demon to rally against, just like Reagan used Russia, Biden's using China. And so here you go, an opportunity for military Keynesianism, because what have they done? They've cut the spigot off on all public spending, with the exception of the interest income channel through the hikes, the interest rate hikes. So by spending on the military, everybody's going to wave their red, white, and blue flag, put on their styrofoam pork pie red, white, and blue hats, cheer USA, 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 and they won't even blink an eye at it. So $100 billion is a drop in the bucket, okay? So each one of these things, Ukraine, let's be fair. Ukraine has had an agreement many moons ago that they were to be neutral, that they were not to join NATO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. While you're watching the people of Donbass slaughtered, you're watching Russia defend its borders. You're watching Russia defend its interests as it's surrounded by the U.S. military. Any idea that this is about Ukraine and protecting Ukraine is a fool's errand. It's a lie. It's 100% about putting the thumb in the other eye of Russia. So make no mistake about it. The U.S. has allowed its infrastructure to fall apart. It's allowed its manufacturing capacity to fall apart. And it's watching as these bricks are coming together to align to make the U.S. payment system an option as opposed to the only thing. And within that space, the U.S. is doing everything it can to gird up its borders, and that's why you see a wall being built. I think it's a Trump wall. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, it's the Trump wall
that Biden is pushing.
Yeah, it's the actual Trump wall. Yes, you're right.
Yes, Biden. Hey, Biden folks, friends of Biden, you built this wall. Don't forget that when you worry about Trump, you built that wall.
Yeah, and Mexico didn't pay for it, by the way.
No, exactly. It's going to be right out of somebody's fingers at the Fed, typing digits into the Treasury's general account as they spend it to the top contractors in the United States to once again leverage a form of military Keynesianism through that infrastructure. That's not infrastructure. That right there is absolutely slaughtering the environment. And let me say one more thing. It may seem disconnected, but I assure you it's not. What we're witnessing right now is cataclysmic climate crisis starting to really take hold. And you're going to see lots and lots of climate refugees in these areas where there's beginning to get arid conditions. You're going to start to, in the Middle East, for example, you're talking about areas of the Middle East that have 250 days out of the year destroyed by sandstorms. You're talking about salt water seeping into the drinking water. You're going to watch migrations from climate crisis happen. And it's not going to just be your friends. It's going to be Hindus moving into Muslim territory where they're natural enemies. You're going to watch the people from the global south trying to move up to areas where there's green and water, drinking water and food and stuff like that. And what are they going to do? You're going to build a wall. Why? Because they're going to try and withhold the resources because everyone needs a demon. And that's what the U.S. uses, demonizing certain groups to be able to authorize funding. And that's where your $100 billion will come from. It's going to play into Republican sensibilities. Yeah, make the wall. Well, it's going to play into the Jewish sensibilities. Absolutely. Arm Israel. It's going to play into all the other folks that have their yellow and blue profile picture all over social media for the Ukraine stuff. It's all about girding up these alliances. It's genius in a very evil way, but it's genius.
Let me ask you, Steve.
It's very destructive.
I mean, I want to know how well you think this is going to go down, though, in an atmosphere where, you know, we have stories like this one in the New York Times about tens of thousands of Americans living in their cars right now. This story starts with this example of a woman named Crystal Audet, whatever. She makes $72,000 a year. She lives in a suburb of Seattle. She has bad credit. She made some mistakes. She got into some debt. And so she is now working, making what is more than the, I think, median income in the United States, and is living in her car in a parking lot surrounded by other people who are in the same situation. There are at least 12 of these parking lots for the working homeless in Washington state alone. I think I said 5 earlier. It's 12. There are dozens across the country. And the story says this is something that has been accelerating over the past 5 years. And I wonder, you know, I mean, I think you're right. People are really susceptible to this, saber rattling and tribalism, right? But the economic atmosphere for a lot of regular Americans is pretty tough right now. And I don't know how successful a big speech saying, if nothing else, can we pull it together to get $100 billion worth of weapons out the door is really going to go down that well when this is happening. So I wonder what you think people should take from stories like these.
Well, let me just say for the record, right? If we could get everybody to not report on stupid stuff and just stay focused on the economy, because, you know, that's my sweet spot. So I naturally think everything should be there. But with that in mind, the reality is that because capitalism doesn't believe in giving people stuff, they believe in welfare because you hit hard times, so let's give you a penny, right? They don't believe in actually fixing the core, because to fix the core is we have a market now we can exploit. We now have the market for providing cheap and expensive parking lots for people to go ahead and park to work from. Gosh, we're doing a service here, you know? We've got these parking lots for the working poor, right? Whatever.
It's amazing.
It's awful.
It is a strategy of markets. It's capitalism. And so the problem is that too many of us have stayed stuck believing that the U.S. is broke.
Yeah.
And so we allow these narratives to play out. Look at what happened with Norfolk Southern in Palestine, Ohio.
Sure.
The U.S. could have fixed it. Look what happened in Flint, Michigan with the water pipes. The U.S. could have fixed it instantly. Look at Puerto Rico. Look at Haiti. Every one of these things, we could have stepped right in without even a flinch. But the problem is there is a market for that. The market for venture capitalists to come in and pick it apart. All these equity firms, you name it, private equity firms, they all have a thing to pay, and they are the big funders of these parties. They are where the oligarchs play their games, and so naturally there will be the Noam Chomsky manufacturing of consent. Tonight is the beginning of the manufacturing of consent. There's going to be lots of horror stories. There's going to be lots of hand wringing. There's going to be lots of pictures of babies and weird things that aren't true, beheadings and stories of craziness to try and sway and build that consent. And ultimately, it is 100% capitalism and the flavor of the day with this neoliberal order. They will not let it be help for people. And here's the thing. The real story is if you're talking about helping people, you've already screwed up. because we don't need to help people. The system is screwed. We need to be providing universal basic services. We need to be providing housing, period, as a right. We need price controls for rent controls, all kinds of commodity collaring. We need to ensure that the real resources that regular people need are not used as a cudgel to put them into a parking lot.
I also want to ask briefly about this, the implications of this report on the U.S. pension system or our retirement system. This is from the Mercer CFA Institute Global Pension Index. We got a C+, which is honestly a little better than I expected. But I do think, we do have Social Security. It's better than our public health system. But we came in 22nd out of 47 countries, as I mentioned, behind Chile, Uruguay, and Kazakhstan. And the ranking basically says what I think is very clear, that retirement funding for white-collar workers actually works okay. But blue-collar workers, and particularly for gig workers, if you're not paying into an employer-sponsored 401k plan, a lot of them are matched, you really are not going to have enough. And it does make me think, we have had an explosion of gig work in the last decade. What happens when people who have earned a lot of their lifetime income through these gig work jobs come to retire? Like, are we looking in a couple of decades, if nothing changes, at an epidemic of impoverished seniors?
Absolutely. It's not just seniors, though. Let's be clear. I want to go back just maybe 10 years ago to the global financial crisis. And people in my age, 54, 55, 60, going back to school to try and reinvent themselves. People that were driving 3 states away to work a night shift at Walmart. We're talking about a time period, right, where people had to take on onerous debt just to survive. They have not dug out of that. And so we're looking at a group of people, kids, that are never going to be able to own a home. And the rent, there's no control on the rent whatsoever. We are looking at times that are so grim and gruesome that if people don't stop doing the jig to all these other things and start putting a real microscope on the economic system and focusing purely on this, what you just described isn't even the tip of the iceberg. It is so corrupt and corroded below the surface. It's almost like, honest to God, for me, knowing what I know and living in my own skin and in my own brain as I'm quiet and silent at night, I literally cry. I lose sleep because it's that bad, and I can't get people to hear it. I can't get people to pay attention. I can't keep people on point. And I've gotten to the point now where it's taken a toll on my health because I know, and I can't make people get it. I can't make people take it and say, yes, this is it. We got to go with this. It's going to happen. And it's going to happen with an uninformed populace, people that are being led by the nose by popular voices that are loud and proud on social media, but are ignoramuses in every meaningful way that couldn't econ their way out of a paper bag. And so society is going to be blindsided by this tsunami that's coming that you just rightfully saw a glimpse of with what you just stated.
Steve, Sidney Powell, one of Donald Trump's many attorneys, decided to save herself. And just a day before jury selection, 4 days before the start of the trial, a racketeering trial in Georgia, she agreed to take a plea to 6 misdemeanor counts of conspiracy. She's going to get a whopping 6 years of probation if the judge accepts the deal. I think that was done on purpose to humiliate her, but she still would have to rat out Donald Trump if she's asked to do so. Just how important do you think this decision is? With 2 former co-defendants now poised to testify against him, I would think Trump would start to be getting worried.
I think about it like this. Trump has been masterful at punting. He's been able to push things out long time. The opportunity for this woman to be on probation for 6 years allows them breathing room to make sure that they have got the people that will testify against Trump, regardless of how far off they push these court cases. If he gets to somehow or another run for president and somehow or another gets the nomination and then, wins the presidency, which wouldn't be a hard thing to fathom, with how horrible Biden is and how disgruntled and uninformed the American public is, I could easily see a Trump 2.0 coming through here. And so what would that be? That would be another 4 years where he could pardon himself, maybe, et cetera. So I think that there's an element here of thinking, what if Donald Trump gets to be president again? What if this carries on longer? What if he pardons himself? What if? I think there's a lot of what if scenarios in there that you maybe have been about humiliating her at some level, but I think that's secondary to planning out how to manage Trump and his legal team stretching out these cases.
Yeah, I think that's good analysis right there. Steve Grumbine, thanks for joining us. Steve is the founder and the CEO of the nonprofits Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, and he's the host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. He's also a leading activist and evangelist for modern monetary theory.